Okay, thank you all for coming out on a cold but sunny Seattle morning. In 1942, my older brother was 4 years old. He was taken away from his home by this government and put in a concentration camp in the Arizona desert. My father never talked about it, neither did David, my brother, but my uncles told me that first year in camp at Poston, they thought he was going to die. They said that the conditions were terrible. The sanitation was bad. The food was terrible. Medical care was almost non-existent. He got dysentery and lost half his weight. They were worried that he would not survive, but he did, thankfully. When we talk to people inside the Northwest Detention Center, they tell us the conditions are terrible. The food is bad. The sanitation is inadequate. The medical care is hard to access, if at all. It's the same old shit. It's the same stuff that's been happening for decades, and it's continuing right now. We say that we have learned a lesson. We say that never again will never happen again, but it's going on. And it's not in some faraway place. It's not in some other state. It's in Tacoma. It's like 30 miles from this point. And our government officials know this. They support it. They fund it. Billions of dollars go to Department of Homeland Security, and billions of that go to ICE and CBP, the people who run the jail that's called Northwest Detention Center. In 1942, my older brother nearly died because of detention. There are hundreds of people in the Northwest Detention Center who have gone on hunger strike. They did 7 hunger strikes in 2023. There's already been 3 hunger strikes started this year. And why do they strike? Because they haven't got justice. Because they're languishing on indeterminate sentences in a prison that's supposed to not be for punishment. It's civil confinement. Civil confinement. There's nothing civil about the Northwest Detention Center. The only thing they have is confinement, and they don't have an endpoint. So they go on hunger strike to demand better conditions, but also for an answer. When will we know our future? When will we know when we can get out? When will we know when we can get home? The same questions my father, my mother, my older brother, my grandparents, my aunts and uncles, the same question they were asking in 1942. We need to give them an answer, and our government officials need to give it now. Thank you.
Woo! Yes, Stan!
Thank you, Stan. We'd now like to ask Barbara Yasui from Sudu for Solidarity to speak.
Woo!
2 years ago, my uncle Minoru Yasui engaged in an act of civil disobedience that inspires me today. He was a young attorney in Portland, Oregon, who knew that the curfew order for the Japanese Americans was unconstitutional, and he set out to deliberately challenge that law. He walked the streets of Portland, Oregon after curfew, hoping to get arrested. He even walked up to policemen and said, "Sir, I'm Japanese American. I'm out after curfew. Here's the curfew law showing you what law I'm breaking. Please arrest me." And the policeman said, "Sonny, you're going to get in trouble. Go home." So my uncle was very frustrated, and after walking the streets of Portland for several hours, he finally got tired, and so he walked into the nearest police station and turned himself in. The officer on duty was glad to oblige him, threw him into the drunk tank where he spent that night. And eventually, he spent 9 months in solitary confinement in the Multnomah County Jail as his case wended its way through the courts, eventually making it all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. He lost his case there, but eventually he was exonerated. His conviction was vacated, and in 2015, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Barack Obama, the first person in the state of Oregon to receive that honor. So when the opportunity to participate in civil disobedience presented itself to me, the first person that I thought of was my Uncle Min. He was so much braver than I am and so much more willing to put himself on the line to prove a principle, to prove that what our government was doing was wrong. In 2016, for the Day of Remembrance celebration in Seattle, we had a big banner made that said, "Never again is now." And yet here it is, 2024, 8 years later, we have put up that banner every single year, and yet nothing has changed. The Northwest Detention Center is still operating. There are weekly deportation flights coming in and out of Boeing Field, King County Airport, and families are still being separated. Albert Einstein said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, and that we need to do something different to make that stop. So clearly it's time for us to go beyond just hanging up our "Never Again is Now" sign and to do something a little bit more. In 3 days, I will celebrate my 72nd birthday on February 19th, 82 years to the day after President Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed Executive Order number 9066. Over the years, I've marched in many demonstrations, I've held signs, and I've chanted, but I've never engaged in an act of civil disobedience. I figure after 72 years, you're never too old to try something new. And so that's why I decided to do this. I thank you all for supporting us, but I remind you that that the reason that we're here is because NWDC is still operating, because the same things that happened in 1942 are still happening now. So stop repeating history.
Stop history.
Never again is now.
Never again is now.
Shut down the Northwest Detention Center.
Shut down the Northwest Detention Center. Woo!
My name is Becca Asaki, and I am here in honor of my grandparents and their entire families who were incarcerated during World War II. This is a photo of my grandmother, Nobu Sakaguchi Asaki. She was 14 years old when her father was torn away from her home by the FBI, right here in Seattle. So I came here to her hometown to say, stop repeating history.
Woo! Yeah, Becca!
When my great-grandfather, her father, was taken away by the FBI, they said it was because he was a threat to national security. That we were an unassimilable race, and that we are a threat to the economy. Those same words today are used against immigrants and are used to justify the incarceration of immigrants at Northwest Detention Center. That is unacceptable. It has been over 80 years. 75 years ago, or after 75 years, when my grandmother was nearing the end of her life, she still told me about the undrinkable water at Tule Lake. My grandfather's mother was in the hospital at Jerome in Arkansas. She was incredibly ill and was incarcerated with her 11 children. The medical care there was so deplorable that she died in a prison camp. She died in a concentration camp. The fact that immigrants today have to go on hunger strike to get decent food, to get decent water, to get medical care, just like my family did, is unacceptable.
Yes, Becca.
It is unconscionable that this government, our government, continues to incarcerate people unjustly, indefinitely. And so we will not stand by and let that happen. We refuse to let history repeat itself and for our community to say nothing. We are here to be the allies, to be the friends, and to be the comrades that we wish we had had in 1942. And so we are here to say to our senators here in this building, enough is enough. You have the power to shut this place down today.
Woo!
And so we will be here and we will continue to fight alongside those inside of Northwest Detention Center until that place is closed. Every single one of these descendants here is here to say, stop repeating history. Shut down the Northwest Detention Center today. Free them all.
Woo!